My name is Ruben. I make video games for Pop Collective. Heliopedia is a terraforming god game in a universe with a friendly sun. And there's a pseudo-scientific chemistry system. So when you first boot up the game, you see this sun that's sleeping. You actually only see the backside. So the first thing you do, the game says, is to drag the camera around with the right mouse button. So you immediately learn that, which is very useful. And then you wake up the sun, and the sun, it's like, oh, welcome, has a little story. And then you have to feed the sun 3 coal, because the sun is hungry. So then you zoom out. A lot of people miss that actually, that you have to zoom out by pressing like a little arrow in the top left. And then you see the whole universe, which is like your playground. And then you go to an asteroid belt, which is your main source of resources. And you collect the coal and other stuff that you find. There's coal, ice, and oxygen. And then you give it to the sun, and the sun then spits out a new planet. And then from there you terraform the planet by adding water or burning coal with oxygen to make it warmer. And from there, like, the whole game kind of unfolds. So the Heliopedia is kind of an in-game encyclopedia, which has all 99 items that are in the game that you can find, or items or phenomena. Both are in there, and it just functions as like a collection book, and also to give the player information, because the game gets quite complicated sometimes. So if the player is stuck, then they can read up in the encyclopedia. A lot of people actually didn't do that, but just were like frustrated, like, why can't I burn this thing? And it's like, what says in the Heliopedia or whatever. I wanted to make Heliopedia because after Kochu's Dream, which didn't sell too well, I wanted to have something that is playable by everyone. And so the idea was to have something that's really, like, in the core, really easy to use. Underlying the game, there's this, I call it pseudo-scientific chemistry system. It's actually based on real chemistry, but as far as, that suits the game. So there's like things like water, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, like elemental stuff. And so how it works that if you burn something, then it takes something that's made of carbon, like wood, and oxygen, and together it burns, and then it becomes CO2. And that's actually how it works as well. But then you actually see that in the game. So I think what I wanted to achieve with Heliopedia was the sense of having the player feel like they're doing science in a video game. So the inspiration for the game came from reading this book about Einstein and Gödel called A World Without Time. And Gödel found this solution for Einstein's field equations that's called a Gödel universe. And I was reading Wikipedia pages about it, and I was very interested in it because it was like a very different kind of universe than we were used to in everyday life. So I had this clipping technology, and then I wanted to use it for making like a kind of universe sandbox game. I already started that in, I think, February. There would be all these physics rules or laws that are different from everyday life, but the player had to do experiments. That was the idea, to do experiments to figure out, okay, how does this world actually work? Then I started to make that, and I had a hard time, of course, coming up with new laws of physics. And also I thought it would be way too hard for people to, do actual, physics experiments in a video game. So I kind of shelved that idea, but it was still lingering. And then in the summer after Gochu's Dream, I came back to that idea, and I remembered Feynman's game, Dr. Ungewoon's School of Life, where you do like chemistry. So there's this atmosphere in a closed bubble, and you do chemistry in there. And I thought, oh, that would be really cool to do, but on a planet. And then also I remembered while doing Helionaut, which has all these different planets that have a certain temperature and humidity, that was really fun to figure out, like, oh, if I do, if it's a very dry and warm, then it's a desert, and if it's if it's warm and wet, then it's a jungle. And you had these like emergent properties just from these two variables, just humidity and temperature. And I already had the idea while doing Helionaut to maybe make like a management or god game with this mechanic. And so kind of those two ideas, like of a universe sandbox game and like a planet terraforming kind of game, kind of merged together. And then kind of that sparked the idea for doing Heliopedia. I think the hardest part to design the game was, next to how all the systems would work, like the nitrogen cycle and the oxygen cycle, was deciding how you would get new elements. Because it was pretty easy to think, okay, you get CO2 by combining carbon, which is cool, with oxygen and burning. So you get CO2. But it's pretty hard to design how to, get a worm or get a rabbit. So I tried a lot of ideas. But in the end, the way it works now in the game is that the sun has this solar shop, I think it's called, which has like a match, and the second tier is grass seeds, or like small seeds for plants. And so the seed, of course, a seed can turn into anything. You don't really, not in real life. In real life, a seed turns into the plant which the seed is from. But in this game, it just turns into something based on the environment. So that kind of interlinks those two things, like having a varied environment and discovering new species. But it's very hard to design these kinds of things because the whole game needs to kind of interlink in this way. So having different environments based on humidity and temperature is cool, but there needs to be some kind of purpose to it. Otherwise, it's not a game, then it's a toy. It really clicked for me when I decided, if there's a seed in a cold environment, it becomes tundra grass, for example, or when it's in a wet environment, it becomes moss. So then I could start adding more and more stuff. But it was very hard to figure out how the progression would actually work. And of course, the solar shop unlocks more if you discover more. So that's kind of the progression that's there. So the discovering stuff is linked to the shop, which is again linked to the discovering stuff. So this whole interlinking stuff. Because if there's something that's not in the system that you have, then it's just like people won't discover it or won't do it because there's no point. So I made the game in Game Maker Studio 1.4 if you're interested. But which it does have 3D support, but I don't use it. So I kind of developed over time as well, over different games, this pseudo 3D engine myself. And it kind of got expanded upon. And for Gochu's Dream, I figured out how to do clipping. So like view plane clipping. And then I think the most interesting technological thing, of course this has been done many times already, but for me it was very cool that the planets can be intersected. Well, something I kind of invented for Heliopedia is like the plane clipping for if you have a planet. I kind of wanted to make the planet more believable, I wanted the player to be able to see the core of the planet as well. Like you sometimes see in these, like, things about the Earth or the Sun, you see this intersection of the body, or like not the body, the planet. So I wanted to do that, but then I had to kind of figure out how to clip like a sphere, and in Helionaut, the planets are actually just circles. So I just take the position of the planet and transform it and draw a circle. Except that's not really correct because of the perspective, the sphere gets kind of warped, and it's noticeable in Helionaut as well. If you're in the spaceship, and then there's a planet kind of to the side or behind you, you kind of see everything's floating above the surface because the planet itself doesn't have this actual 3D quality. So for Heliopedia, I actually made like not really a model, but the planets consist of vertices, actual triangles. And that's also because I wanted to do the plane clipping, which you don't really see any way to do that with an actual circle. Then of course, because it's GameMaker, it got really, really slow. So I had to figure out how to do that efficiently, which was, a lot of fun, also frustrating sometimes. And I think it gave me a way better understanding of how to do these vertex-based 3D stuff. Most smaller spheres are actually just drawn as a circle because it's much cheaper. The GameMaker isn't a very fast engine, so I have to really budget everything I want to draw. For example, the ice and the coal is very costly to draw, so I was trying very hard to optimize all of that. But still, there's some computers that it just runs very poorly, and it kind of sucks. It's all CPU bound, so even if you have a really good graphics card, it doesn't really matter. So the planets in the game are actually triangulated spheres, but if I were to do that for every coal object and every ice object, which are also vertex based, then it would get way too expensive really fast. So I found this algorithm called the gift wrapping algorithm, which takes like a bundle of points and finds the convex hull around it. So it's like as if you wrap a gift, I guess, around a bunch of points. So what I did was have all these vertices of these, for example, a coal block. Find the outermost vertices, and then just draw like a flat vertex thing on it. And I think I made there's also a middle vertex, which I gave a different color. And so it looks really good, but it's actually just a flat thing. It's not even a real 3D object, I guess. So that was really fun to find a way, because I was really struggling to make coal and ice look good. Because if it were just a sphere, then everything would be spheres, and it would just, everyone would look the same, just a different color. So I'm really happy that I actually managed to do that quite efficiently. I think the game has been received generally pretty well. It has like a bunch of positive ratings on Steam, at least. But there's also some negative reviews. People saying oh, there's not an equilibrium you can reach if there's animals, which is, I guess, a fair complaint. Or people who were just like, I was expecting something else. It's kind of a weird game, because you're kind of released into this universe and like, oh, go explore. And some people just don't like that. Some people just need like a very concrete thing that they can work on. I think it's a fun game that's very accessible. That's always very important to me, that people understand the game, can play it. But I think it's still lacking in many ways. That could be done a lot better. But in the end, I think it's a fun, unique experience for people. Yeah. That could be better. But it is what it is.